I'm the Douglas County engineer, and fate would have it I'm the speaker before lunch, so it doesn't matter what I say. You guys are going to hear pizza, sausage, and pepperoni. But anyway, we in Douglas County have a riverbank that is moving, which isn't concerning generally, but the location of this riverbank, where it's moving, is a little bit concerning. So this is a topographic map of Douglas County, and we have a diversion dam. It's actually at this location here, kind of by the Garnerville Ranchos, the south end of Douglas County, and it provides irrigation water to both the Virginia Allerman Canal Company, irrigation company, and to the Rocky Slough users. The total acreage, you can see the Cree irrigated acreage according to the USGS amounts to about 10,000 acres, 11,000 acres of irrigated ranch land that gets water from this structure. So the structure was replaced last year, but the irrigation users were a little bit nervous about what's taking place just south of the structure. We have an area, a bank that is moving, and the nervousness of it is if it continues to move, continues to erode to the east, eventually it bypasses the irrigation structure, and we wouldn't have the ability to irrigate to those two irrigation companies. So avulsion, which is if a river leaves its natural course and goes somewhere else, would affect the community, not only the livelihood of the irrigation users, but if it did avulse, it would likely take out half of a golf course and flow towards the Carson Valley Medical Center, which if you're having a flood, you want to keep your medical centers open, not washed away. So obviously flood patterns would be changed. So the question with this is, okay, it was identified as the river's moving, and it obviously is. There's fence line after fence line after fence line that has been pushed back. But what is the risk of avulsion? How far will it go? And what can be done to keep the river where it is today, or at least not going any further? And with that introduction, I will turn the time over to Peter Wycheck and Dave Shaw from Balance Hydrologics to discuss a little bit more about what their studies show.
Great. So I'm Dave Shaw. I'm a hydrologist, geologist with Balance Hydrologics. And so Eric presented this problem to us. And the first thing we did, well, I'll walk you through what we're going to talk about here, as well as how we approached this question of what's the risk of avulsion and what can we do about it. Eric has really just defined our goals and objectives of what we're trying to achieve here. We know that folks, like a lot of you, have done a lot of work in this area already. So we started off by collecting a lot of that work that folks have done specific to this area, also just regional geology, soils, hydrology information, and studies that have been carried out by others. And so that, with some field evaluations of the site, allows us to characterize the process, what's causing this bank retreat, and what's happened here, and what are the processes, how is it happening? And so that brought up some additional questions, some things that we don't know about this particular site at a very localized scale. So we filled in those gaps with some geomorphic mapping some site-specific evaluations of the character of the site. And that information, along with a little bit of hydrology and hydraulic modeling, has allowed us to really assess that risk using some of the, also the topographic data that has been collected across the valley. And so then we'll wrap up the talk with just an introduction to, okay, what are some of the types of approaches that we could take here to address this issue conceptually. We're not yet at the point of design, but just trying to get a feel for where we could go with it. So this is our location. Eric pointed this out. The diversion is here. The failing bank is just upstream of the diversion. So this red line here, right in here, is our study area. If I'm seeing this correctly, the Riverview Drive Bridge is just downstream from our site. I also want to point out the mouth of the canyon is East Fort Carson coming out of the mountains right onto this site. So why is that important in terms of geology? This is a geologic map of the site. These different colors represent different periods of deposition, sediment deposition. So this is an alluvial fan type of an environment where you have a river exiting a canyon. It's a steep canyon. It's carrying a lot of sediment from the mountainous upper watershed. And we see this all over the basin and range. As it comes out onto the valley floor, it loses, the slope changes, the water slows down, it loses its capacity to carry that sediment, and the sediment drops out. You guys see this all over. And what happens is, as it drops that sediment out, that sediment gets in the way of the water, and the river changes course. That's the natural process. It may split, it may change course into two different areas. So each of these different surfaces that have been mapped, these geologic surfaces, represent periods of sediment deposition. You have very old, high terraces that were deposited a long time ago. You have younger terraces that were deposited more recently, and then you have this gray in here. That's the historical river wash. That's the area where the river was prior to construction of levees and diversion ditches and things of that nature. You can see that historical river wash actually split in a number of places, just like you would predict on this classic alluvial fan type of system. So we're also, right here, and so this thin yellow band now is the portion of the river that's been channelized. That's where we have the river today. It's confined by levees and controlled by diversion dams in a lot of places. Right upstream of that is this unstable bank. And you see that bank is starting to eat into some of these, some of these older sediments. They're finer grained, they've been around for longer, they've had more time to develop, to weather into soils. So this is fine grained sediment, less cohesive, less resilient, that's being eroded out of this one location where the channel's migrating. This is just another view, if you can see this at all, of that same, looking up into the canyon from the valley. And you see, that makes sense. We're exiting the canyon. This is an aggradational reach. Sediment is being deposited. There's a lot of sediment that's coming out of the canyon, and we're transitioning to this shallow slope. On top of that, we have diversions at a number of places. So take that already shallow slope where sediment wants to be accumulating and add a diversion structure that's however high, 6 feet, 8 feet high. So you're effectively creating a dam. This is a longitudinal profile of the river, just looking at it along its length as it descends in elevation across the valley. And you can see from this higher resolution topo mapping that each of these dams is actually further reducing that slope. So, so at these unique locations, we're taking an already a grading system where the channel wants to be moving around and enhancing that. So the channel wants to move around even more at this particular location. So we're not going to claim, to be the first ones to figure this out. Interfluve did a study in 1997 showed this. The USGS also developed a sediment transport model of the East Fork of the Carson, and also, through computational methods and numeric modeling, showed that, yeah, this is a reach where sediment is accumulating. So we know what the river wants to do. We know what it's doing in a lot of places. So we started to look at it at a site-specific scale and see how that's being manifested at this particular site. I talked a little bit about levees and how that narrow strip of that one color is basically where the river is now. This is a soils map. I'm not sure how well it shows up here, but the soils map shows the same thing that the geology map does in terms of that historical river wash corridor. So it's basically from here to here. There's now levees that go down, a levee on both sides in many places. In particular, it's primarily along the left bank here that's cutting that river corridor in half. We know the river still wants to accumulate sediment. The slope is changing. It wants to widen. Now it really only has one direction to go because this is a pretty good levee, and it's got to be there. There's a golf course and houses behind it. So, so the other thing that's happening, so as that sediment accumulates, we're also developing bars in the system. One bar in particular is being deposited right upstream of the diversion, and that feature has been, is a primary point at which the river takes a bend into that opposite floodplain. So here's this bar that I'm talking about here. Here's the levee. There's a little kink in the levee here. It changes direction a little bit. That bar forms right here, and then as a result, we have the right bank actively retreating. I'm going to let Peter take it from here. He's done a lot of the site-specific analysis, and aerial photo interpretation and modeling.
Yeah, so this figure shows how the river has responded to that levee. Well, it shows the river before the levee, and then how it got straight once the levee was put in, and then how it's responded since the levee cut that band of river wash that Dave mentioned in half. Oops. So this is a plan view. We digitized a bunch of historic aerial photos. So starting with the really bright yellow colors, if you can see them, really sinuous river back in the early 1900s. And this is the same thing, but in numerical format. So we're showing sinuosity, which is a measure of how the length of the river compared to the straight line distance, and then also meander belt width, which is just how wide the amplitude of those meanders are. Clear low point here, right after the BOR installed their levees and did all their channelization projects around the late 1950s, 1960s. Since then, you see this kind of general trajectory towards where it used to be in the early 1900s, but we're not quite there yet. So, it's trying to bang out this new meander belt width, but we're not quite there. Just a few major features in the site that I want to point out. So up here in the upstream end of the site, it has achieved a wider meander belt width, but not quite what we had in the early 1900s. It really needs to get pinched down to where the diversion is up here, because so it can go over the thing, and that width gets cut into maybe a third or so. Dave mentioned the kink in the levee. That'll come up again later, so keep that in the back of your mind. And then again, we have our bar and our problem bank over here that's eroding very rapidly. And this is a geomorphic map that we developed as part of this study that really looks at all the important features out there, really fine details, so we can figure out what are the key processes lending to this rapidly eroding bank. So now we're looking at, this is kind of similar to the first figure I showed, except instead of just tracing the channel center line, this shows we've traced where the right bank has been over the last 50 years or so. So it was down here before the levees, and then here it is after the levees, and it's made its way over the last 30, 40 years here. And then just between, this is orange line, if you can see it, is 2010, and then just 2 years later, it's retreated quite a bit. And that's what's really raising the cause for alarm. So when the bank does retreat, these things are episodic. It's not like slow and steady. You get a moderate to high flow, and then you get a good deal of bank retreat. And it doesn't really have to be a real gully washer. This is the peak snowmelt from 2011, which we had a big snowpack that year, but not, really, biblical flood or anything like that. It was moderate in terms of its magnitude. But you can see just in the course of a month, this photo on the left is May 13th, and the one on the right is June 16th. The banks retreated, and you'll have to take my word for it that there's a fence here, and using that as a point of reference, it retreated just 5 or 6 feet in the course of a month there. So it was, moderate flood integrated over a long duration caused all that bank retreat. And we anticipate that to continue. So right now, there's been some remedial efforts following, I believe it was the 1997 flood, installing some boulder barbs here. They're just basically piles of boulders keyed into the bank that are trying to keep the channel in place and funnel towards the diversion. One of those, I believe, was flanked already. Another is perhaps on the verge of being flanked. These boulder barbs are really controlling the shape of this bank and creating this scallop shape of the bank. Now what we have is flow coming around the meander and hitting this bank at almost a 90-degree angle. So that's really accelerating the rate of bank retreat and increasing the risk of erosion. And, we expect that this pattern to continue and you keep getting this scallop shape. Perhaps the channel pulses out this way. And with the down valley direction, generally being this way, as the bank goes this way, it chases the down valley contour. So the height of that bank that the flow needs to overtop becomes lower as the channel retreats in this direction. So how much flow does it take for that bank to overtop? We looked at the hydrology of the site. There's about a 400 square mile watershed there. Usually our peaks are from snowmelt, but as we know historically, like in '97, the extreme ones have been from these rain on snow events. We built a 1D model to figure out, of the reach, to figure out at what flow this bank overtops, because avulsion, in order for that to happen, we need to have flow going over the bank and carving a new path through the land. So what does it take for that bank to overtop? We figured out from our 1D model that that's about 8,000 CFS or so, which is this red line here. And then using some USGS gauge data, we did a flood frequency analysis, but then separated what are the snowmelt peaks, which are these down here, from what are the rain on snow peaks, which are the one above here. So, in superimposing the two, we can say that the risk of avulsion in that bank overtopping is correlated with these rain on snow events, which have the capacity to overtop the bank. So when the bank does overtop, this is what it looks like. A lot of people talk about this already today, but a lot of big, wide, flat valleys, so we get a lot of broad, shallow flooding. This is from '97. You can see the diversion over here. This is what FEMA says the flooding looks like right now. So now our diversion is down here somewhere. I'm showing this because I'm going to start talking about the flood risk that has to do with the risk of avulsion now. There's a low point at the intersection of 395 and Riverview Drive, and currently water overtops there and flows towards the Carson Valley Medical Center, which is up here. If, perhaps it does avulse and, it can easily pick up any one of these little irrigation or drainage channels on the right bank, and that become the new channel. So all of a sudden we're going to get more floodwater directed towards this low point and eventually towards the Carson Valley Medical Center. So that's how the flood risk could potentially change with the channel avulsing and flanking the diversion structure. So based on our study, we concluded the risk of avulsion is significant. All the things I talked about with predictions with these rain on snow events becoming more frequent, the risk is increased even more. So what are we going to do about it? We've kind of grouped our design solutions into 3 categories. You can do the maintenance thing where you just go through and hug the channel out every once in a while and straighten it, and then you're signing up for getting in there every few years and all the permitting that's associated with that. 2, we can allow the channel to widen, but within some bounds. So, do like a setback levee or something. I'll show some pictures of what I mean by that in a minute. 3 is controlled avulsion and allowing the channel to avulse, but doing so in a controlled fashion that you kind of create like a pressure relief valve and provide some flood relief, but maintain the diversion point so irrigators still get all their water. Some tools for that, we developed a 2D hydraulic model as well as our 1D model to do things like, look at the shear stress on the bank, which is, controls how much the bank erodes. So, you know, we put in one of our solutions into the model and see how much it reduced the shear stress in that bank, and then, you know, assess its worth based on that. Another view of the model, we use the Bureau of Reclamation's SRH2D model. So here is one of our ideas where we provide some flood relief by carving out this side channel that's here. This used to be the historic channel, but it's been choked by vegetation. Some beaver have made it home, and it's had the net effect of increasing the roughness in there, reducing the capacity of this side channel, and forcing more water out this way towards the bank, and, you know, hammering that bank more than it would be. So back to the kink in the levee that I mentioned. So here's the levee down here. So we thought, well, what if you took this kink out? Because it kind of appears to be correlated with the formation of this bar. You know, you get some eddying behind the levee that deposits some sediment, some plants take root there, then you get this feedback, the plants cause more sedimentation, and eventually this bar forms. Here's the setback levee, and this isn't necessarily what it would look like. It'd be really important to really taper this down gradually, and that'll depend on, you know, how many trees we're willing to take out, and if they want to lose the, whatever that is, 7th green or whatever, or move it. But basically, you're allowing the channel to eat through this land here, but providing a buried levee that would provide a hard structure that would say you can only go this far, and that would be based on the historic Neanderthal width. This is a cross-view section of that, so here's the eroded bank, so just putting the setback levee some distance back from that. You could accelerate that a little bit, recognizing that this wedge of material is going to be eaten through and delivered downstream, possibly, you know, affecting habitat by delivering a bunch of fine sediment, affecting water quality. So this is kind of another alternative for that alternative, where you accelerate that process and do some grading concurrent with the boulder setback levee. And this last one is the kind of control divulsion, which builds on the boulder setback levee. But instead of forcing all the water back here, you know, you could do something like have a perched flood relief channel that's just kind of like a pressure relief valve, perhaps connect it to one of the irrigation ditches. You'd have to do some grading to widen the irrigation ditch at the same time. There's potential there to do some wetland mitigation banking, widening the irrigation canal in a way that could create an inset bench. I think that's something that's in the Douglas County Master Plan, and that they'd like to do wetland mitigation banking. So there's an opportunity for that there. So that's about all we've got. You know, all of our design solutions, we really tried hard to make them consistent with all the watershed management plans out there, the integrated watershed management approach. And, you know, it's just a feasibility study, and these are just some ideas we're proposing. But yeah, that's all we've got. So thank you. If anyone's got questions, I'm happy to take a crack.
I noticed that you're in the regulatory floodplain. Is there a plan to do a conditional letter of not producing, or how are you going to changes in that floodplain?
Yeah, I mean, we're just not that far along in the planning process yet. I mean, certainly, you know, we can't undermine any of the larger mapping efforts that, you know, HDR in particular is undertaking. So, yeah, it'll just be important to be wary of that.
Yeah, avulsion sounds like some sort of a evil, unpleasant medical condition almost. And meander, nice, natural, friendly, soft and fuzzy word. How would you feel if I were to characterize the fact that perhaps meander is a word that just isn't going to be seen for a long time in the lower reaches of the Carson River?
So, I'm sorry.
Is meander ever going to happen again?
Yeah, you know, the reality is the diversion is there, and a lot of people depend on it. So, you know, we just need to figure out a way to balance the needs of this dynamic wild river with the needs of the community that's developed around it. So, you know, we can allow it to meander to some degree, but, you know, we rely on it at the same time. So it's just finding a way to, you know, respect the river and give it what it needs, and, you know, give all the irrigators and other people that depend on it what they need as well. So it's a hard line to walk. All right, thank you.
Sorry. So today I'm gonna give you some information on really the keystone of what I do. So my title is State Floodplain Manager / NFIP Coordinator, or National Flood Insurance Program Coordinator. So really the National Flood Insurance Program is what I do. And it's of course a FEMA program, but everything that's been talked about today kind of hinges around the protection of life and property and the environment. And so we're going to give you a kind of an overview, maybe a National Flood Insurance Program 101 course. In addition, we're going to look at some recent flooding in Nevada. In 2014, the third year of our ongoing drought, we actually had 5 or 6 county declarations of emergency for flooding. We had 2 state declarations and 1 federal declaration, 1 presidential declaration. So even though we're in a drought, we still have flooding issues. So the question's already been answered by other speakers, but why are we talking about floods in a drought? We're also going to take a look at some of the resources we have, and then I'll answer questions at the end of the presentation. So first off, if you would play that MOAPA video for me. And I apologize in advance. Actually, before the video plays, I'll just say that no one died in the filming of this video. This video takes place on I-15 in southern Nevada, near the MOAPA area.
This is the middle of the highway in Nevada.
And there is one
It's flooding down the
expletive
middle of the
that's used
highway.
here. I apologize.
Down the median, under the bridge, and over this way.
Yes, the wrong way, as long as we don't see a car floating down them.
Yeah, 10-4. Like that.
Yeah, there is one coming down, ain't there?
Yeah, there's a car coming. That guy just got swept up in the water. Holy sh!
That was September 8th, 2014, after we just got through one of the driest summers on record. And we had a river in the middle of I-15 between the north and southbound lanes. There was an elderly couple in that van. They both turned out okay at the end of all that. They were visiting, I think, as tourists in Arizona. They were on their way home, and they got a little more of a joyride than they thought they would. The person that tried to rescue them was swept away. You know, the water was carrying the van down, no problem. It could carry a person, no problem also. He was later rescued underneath the bridge, hanging onto a bush. He had broken his wrist. The people in the car, the gentleman was able to climb to the top of the car. The lady got washed downstream and was rescued by emergency rescue personnel downstream. So other than a few cuts and bruises and a broken wrist, everybody came out of this one okay. I heard an estimate on the flow, and they could only estimate because some of the stream gauges in that area were actually washed away. The estimate was at 16,000 feet per second. So that was the flow that you were looking at there. So that waterfall you see is actually going down to an underpass, the Glendale exit, and then it was coming out the other side. So we're talking about floodplain management in Nevada. And some of you may look at this map and say, well, that's not a very detailed map. But it does tell us a lot about Nevada. Number one, right there. Okay, we have a Great Basin. And actually we have, if you count them all, there's about 256 separate basins in Nevada. And a basin is basically a bathtub, and bathtubs fill up with water from time to time. So a few years ago, and I don't know if you can see this from where you're standing, but this is This is not the 97 flood inundation area. Here is Lake Tahoe, and this is ancient Lake Lahontan right here. So really, Nevada at one time was pretty much just a series of islands. And so Nevada historically has had some significant water. Of course, things have changed a little bit, things have dried out, but there's still a potential for some of these basins to fill with water. Nevada is the driest state in the Union at approximately 9 inches per year. So we have some various challenges when we talk about floodplain management. So I've listed some of the myths that we most commonly hear, and as you read through this list, and we'll go through them here in a second, but as you read through this, pick out your favorite one, because I have my favorite. Floods only happen to other people. It has never flooded here, so it never will. There was a flood problem, but it has been fixed. It's been fixed. If flooding were a problem, someone would have told us, and that's why we pay taxes. It's only water, it's no big deal to be flooded. No, not quite. The government will bail me out. My homeowner's policy will cover me. We'll talk more about that one later. This is the desert. We don't need no stinking flood insurance. And I use stinking, but I've heard other words used there too. So, all right. Okay, so let's all play with the same deck of cards. What is a flood? The FEMA definition for the National Flood Insurance Program is a general and hopefully temporary condition, partial or complete inundation of 2 or more acres, or 2 or more properties, at least one of which is a policyholder's. And generally in Nevada, we have an unusual and rapid accumulation of runoff or surface waters, or mud flow. We generally don't have to deal with coastal flooding or large parts of a lake subsiding into the lake, that sort of thing. So generally, we have a rapid accumulation of runoff from surface waters. Okay, FEMA maps, and you've heard this before, they're all based on that 100-year flood event, or what we call the 1% chance flood. And so here's an actual flood map, and this was taken off the National Flood Hazard Layer yesterday. And we are right here, I believe. And so you can see this blue area here is the flood zone. This is considered floodway here. And this is the 500-year floodplain. And then we're in the area of minimal flood hazard just outside of that 500-year floodplain. So the base flood, or the 1% chance flood, is that flood that will reach a certain level, and it's given a 1% chance of happening in a year, in any year rather. So it can happen multiple times in a year. We can miss a few years, but that flood is just a level. It's based on the base flood elevation. Okay, so 3 types of flooding that we generally encounter in Nevada: flash flooding, debris flows, and riverine flooding, or river flooding. And we're going to talk about each of these and actually show you some real-life examples of these events. So, Johnson Lane, Douglas County in general, got hit with a series of flash flood events this last summer. And this is actually a picture of the Hot Springs Mountain area. This is actually a FEMA flood map with effective panels in 2009. And then this was taken shortly after the flash flooding that occurred, where 1.25 inches of rain fell on Hot Springs Mountain in about an hour and a half, 2 hours. So that was the first event they had. And Joanne, if you could play that video for me, the Mac Lane.
What? Sorry.
It's okay.
Going back.
Go back.
Mother Nature showed its power yesterday afternoon in a flash flood to rival anything northern Nevada has seen in years.
Oh my gosh, this is the craziest thing I've ever seen.
Started raining, hailing, we were getting it on video, and then heard a loud noise, and the whole mountain started coming down in our backyard. devastating. It really hasn't really hit us. Last night, we were out here working until about 12:30, quarter to 1 at night.
Today, the work continued. Amongst their tasks, getting their cars free, clearing out a safe path to the home, and working on a plan to tackle the backyard. This really illustrates how bad the situation is. This right here is the family swimming pool. Doesn't look like it because now it's completely filled with mud.
We just got to get rid of it because we're swimming in it.
Spread across this neighborhood, several thousand cubic yards of dirt. The question now, where to put it?
That's our biggest concern at the moment, is getting rid of this material. We have no room to put it anywhere.
And the only way to get the area clean is to get the dirt out.
I think mud is probably the hardest because it's so heavy and it ruined everything. So honestly, I don't know how long it's going to take to clean up.
So that was Mack Lane in the Johnson Lane subdivision area. And we'll go back to that picture here in a second, which shows those two flows that actually came off Hot Springs Mountain and deposited a bunch of silty, muddy debris down right into that house there, pretty much. And pretty much just inundated that section of the neighborhood. So that wasn't the only flood that Douglas County experienced. Actually, there were 4 separate events that caused flash flooding. I think the first one was probably the most, had the most damage that occurred with it. But you can see here that the county declared for all 4 of those events. And we're going to talk a little bit more about the declaration process here in a few minutes. But so the next one we want to talk about are debris flows or debris avalanches. And this is where you have a normally steep slope, you have a heavy rain, and it's especially bad if it happens after a fire. So in 2013, we had the Carpenter Fire, which burned 30,000 acres on Mount Charleston and left a lot of denuded forest and a lot of open land that was very susceptible to the heavy rainfall that came down and washed really, and I'm sorry you can't see the detail, but a lot of like fish size to toaster size rocks washed into this neighborhood. This is 2013. So basically right after the fire was pretty much over, there was a rain event, and this neighborhood of Rainbow Canyon was inundated with the debris flows and flooding. And then in 2014, the same thing happened again, almost to the day a year later. Fortunately for this gentleman here, I talked to him personally. In 2013, he saw what happened. He went out and bought flood insurance the very next day after that flood. So he was completely covered when debris went through his lower floor windows. This is kind of a before and after picture here on the bottom, showing a trail that's right up above that subdivision. And you can see that sign is almost completely buried. This is another picture of the Rainbow Canyon subdivision. And you can see the picture on the left and the picture on the right are the same house, just from a side view and a front view. And when I first came up to this house, I thought this log was actually part of the deck. This log sticking out here actually had washed down the hillside and had run into the house. And you can see the debris that they're moving away. This house had just been remodeled. Going back there. So the event happened on July 28th. There was a county declaration on August 6th, and the state declared at the same time. So the last one we'll talk about is the flood event that happened on September 8th. And it not only affected the highway, and here's an aerial view of the highway, the I-15 highway, and you can see basically it just kind of crisscrossed the road and took out really all 4 lanes at different points of that I-15 route. Well, it also went through the Moapa Bandit Paiutes tribe, and this is a dam that was breached, an earthen dam that was breached as part of that event. So they actually declared fairly soon after the storm on September 9th, there was a county and state declaration, and then November 5th, there was actually a presidential declaration. The last type of flooding that we're going to talk about, and again, some of these pictures are going to seem familiar to you, is the Great Flood of '97. And these normally happen in the wintertime. They are normally associated with heavy snowpack and a rain on snow event. And so Jay showed you a number of pictures, so I won't dwell too much on this. This is, of course, downtown Reno. Same picture that Jay showed you. And this is Winfield Park, kind of a before and a normal conditions set up there. So, just as a way of reminder, since, well, let me ask you this. Show of hands, how many people were here in 1997? Okay, that's more than I normally see. Normally when I ask that question, maybe half the room raises their hand, or even less than that. How many of you have lived here greater than, let's say, 9 years? Okay, so most of you are longtime residents. For those people who haven't lived here that long, they haven't seen flooding. They didn't see the 2006 flood, they didn't see the 97 flood. And so what tends to happen is you get flood amnesia. And it's like, well, it doesn't rain much here, and it's not gonna rain much here, and why do we have to worry about flooding? Why do we have to pay flood insurance? So, just as a way of reminder, and we'll start just with heavy snowpack, lots of rain, and the totals I've seen anywhere from about 22 inches all the way to 27 inches of rain that happened on the snow. And combine that with 2 to 3 inches of rain actually in the valley as well. So all that compounded to inundate approximately 63,000, almost 64,000 acres in 3 different valleys, or 3 different river basins rather. Estimates of damage, I like Jay's numbers better, but 619 million, that was kind of the starting point. And then it goes up from there, a number of dollars lost to businesses because businesses were closed, highways were closed. The Reno Tahoe Airport was closed almost 2 days, amazingly only 2 days, but $30 million in damage. 30 million in damage. Interstate 80 and 365 were closed for 2 days. The Walker River Canyon didn't come back. That highway didn't open until mid-summer of 1997. And unfortunately, 2 lives were lost in that event as well. So other considerations for potential flooding, these are things that we have to look at, are dam failure. This is a picture of the Lahontan Dam, and this is one of the years when Lahontan was blue. So keep Lahontan blue in Colorado. But we are mainly concerned with these types of dams right here, where the probable loss of life could occur. So the Lahontan Dam is one such dam. And so there is a dam safety program that's run through our office that looks at those dams periodically. And so if you live downstream of a dam, what is your risk? You may not even be in a 100-year floodplain, but should you have flood insurance? Well, let's take a look at this next video. And I'll just preface this next one with, this is not Nevada. It'll become immediately apparent to you. This is Iowa. A flood that happened or actually a dam breach that happened in 2010. But I think it illustrates very well what could happen here.
You can see what the incredible power of water can do, blasting this giant hole in the dam. In a matter of hours, all of Lake Delhi, 9 miles of it, water, fish, boats, everything washed downstream when the dam gave way. It happened in a matter of seconds.
There it goes. Oh my God.
The torrential wall of water breached the dam, then kept going, sweeping homes off foundations, inundating everything in its path. Waterfront homes now teeter on the edge of a washed-out riverbank. All of that water gushing downstream into the community of Monticello.
Well, there really wasn't a whole lot we could do. You know, it's just let it go and clean it up when it's done.
Water is just part of the problem. Raw sewage from a flooded treatment plant poured into businesses and basements.
We knew it was possible, but we didn't think it was probable.
The damage after this fast and ferocious flood estimated in the millions.
It's simply unbelievable. Just it's simply too much water.
Now residents plan to repair the dam, refill this lake, but rebuilding homes here may not be so easy. Many here do not have flood insurance.
Many here do not have flood insurance. So, is it a good idea to have flood insurance if you live below a dam It's a really good idea, yeah. Just to let you know, we are currently completing a project that we started almost a year ago now to digitize all the dam inundation maps. Each high hazard dam has to have an emergency action plan, and so we get paper copies of those. Paper is really hard to share with folks, so we've digitized all those now, and those are available to, or will become available very soon to at least emergency managers. Okay, is there a high hazard dam near you? The red dots indicate high hazard dams in our state. The other consideration that we do have canals that run through our state, and every once in a while they let go. Firmly, one January morning, after a fresh snow, some residents woke up to about 4 feet of water in their homes. The cause of that dam breach, or that levee breach rather, was attributed to rodent activity. Rodents had eroded and allowed water to seep through and then cause a catastrophic failure. It took a while to shut that water off, so an entire neighborhood was inundated. Some of the effects of flooding. This top picture here, I've talked to now 2 people that have actually lived in this home. This was the '97 flood, and they got a little closer to the river than they hoped, I think. And the picture below, of course, is the deposition that can occur with some types of flooding, and the lower picture, that famous picture that everybody uses of the Truckee Tahoe International Airport. And you can see those people are hip deep in water. Kind of hard to fly planes in that. Okay, talking about floods and the drought. If you have looked at the Sierra Nevadas lately, you are seeing history. In the 103 years that they've been measuring snowpack in the Sierras, this is the lowest year of precipitation. So, the question is, do you remember the last big flood? You all do, because you were all here in '97 and 2006 and so on, but many people that move here don't. So we have to stay on top of it. We have to stay vigilant, and we have to be prepared. So here is a list of floods and droughts throughout Nevada history. This is not the definitive, exhaustive list, but I think it's a pretty good indicator that we do have a lot of flooding and droughts interspersed in there. Our longest drought was here in 28 through 37. So we're now in our 4th year, but we know a large flood is going to come again. There's going to be a large flood. So that's a picture of the 1861 flood, or a drawing rather. Ed, did you draw that? Okay, and the other picture there is the Hoover Dam, and you can see the bathtub ring around the lake there at its lowest level since it was built. By the way, just as an aside on Hoover Dam, they've actually been, now I think this is the 14th consecutive year that the water level is dropping. So they've actually been in a drought a little bit longer than the rest of the state. Okay, so I deal with the National Flood Insurance Program. It was created in 1968 because flood insurance was super, super high. People couldn't afford to pay it. And because we had flooding events. And the federal government was going into debt big time. And so this program was created. It was created as a voluntary program. It was also created for communities to participate in. So individuals couldn't necessarily participate in it unless a community did. What's a community? A city, a county, or a tribe. That's a community. So your community has to participate for the residents and business owners to be able to buy subsidized flood insurance. So the community's responsibility is to adopt and enforce regulations for development in the floodplain. Of course, it makes you eligible for flood insurance, and the benefits are the fact that you do get flood insurance, your grants and loans become available to you that weren't otherwise available, disaster assistance, and also makes for a more flood resilient community. So the goals: save lives and protect property primarily. So low-cost flood insurance, again, that comprehensive approach to floodplain management, which you've heard a lot about today. Also, to reduce the rising disaster relief costs. Ed told you earlier that FEMA is currently $23 billion in the hole. And so there have been some recent changes in the flood insurance regulations and where they're trying to recover some of those costs. So 3 basic components, and again, you've heard a lot about the mapping, which is knowing your risk. We're talking now about insurance, and then the regulations and mitigation practices that communities participate in. So those are the 3 basic elements of the National Flood Insurance Program. So let's bring it to Nevada. In Nevada, we have 34 communities that participate. That represents about 14,000 policies, 3.4 billion in coverage, 8.8 million in premiums paid, 39 million in claims paid since 1968. $25,000 is the average claim amount. So, bringing it a little closer to home, these are the numbers, both the city and the policies, or the county and the policies, number of policies. Douglas County takes the cake with 1,200, and Astoria with 199 has the lowest amount of flood insurance policies. But that represents $690 million in flood insurance coverage. Okay, I'm not going to read through all this. You can kind of read that. I've got less than 5 minutes left in my presentation now, so I've got to run through some slides. But if you're waiting for disaster assistance to make up your flood losses, it's not a good bet. With flood insurance, there's no payback requirement. You can't be refused for repeat events. It's available to renters, to homeowners, to business owners. It's just really a great way to go in comparison to disaster assistance. Most disaster assistance is a loan which you have to pay back. Okay, this slide basically talks about the presidential declaration process. The letters here are really small on purpose, so you can't really see, that. No, this is actually the process, and I can make this available to anybody who wants it, but it's an involved process. Local responders respond, they realize that things are out of their control, then the county gets involved, or the city, and then the county or city realizes, hey, we can't handle this, there's too much. So the state gets involved, and then once the state figures out that it meets the threshold, which is about $4 million, then they figure, well, we can't handle this either, so let's get some federal dollars in here to handle this. Okay, so what do I do? Part of my job is to support the local floodplain managers, and we have a few of those people here today. We do training and workshops. We also provide coordination and support for flood hazard mapping. In addition, we support the local floodplain mitigation management projects. We provide technical assistance to anybody who calls us. Last year, we fielded 467 calls for information on the flood insurance program. Also, we do demonstrations. We hand out informational brochures. We also work with the Division of Emergency Management, and we help support mitigation projects. I am a member of the Hazard Mitigation Planning Committee. We meet 4 times a year. Also, I'm a member, or our office is a member of the State Assessment and Response Team. That's the team that goes out at the governor's request to do assessments on flood damage. In addition, we do presentations like the one I'm doing now. So, okay, why do I need flood insurance? Well, basically, without reading through this entire slide, it can flood anywhere. It literally can flood anywhere. So that's why we recommend you have flood insurance. Most people who are flooded didn't go to bed that night thinking, I'm going to be flooded tomorrow. They just woke up to it. So if you don't live in a special flood hazard area, flood insurance is still available to you because your community participates in the National Flood Insurance Program. And for as little as $414 a year, you can get $250,000 of house and $100,000 of contents coverage. Not a bad deal. Okay, so like everybody else these days, we have a website. It's nevadafloods.org, and there are some informational flyers over here. Some swag is still left on the table. And if you look at the back of your program, there is a flood awareness blurb on the back, which gives our website. And this date, November 10th through the 15th, was last year's date. So I think this year we're going to go a week earlier. So we'll be sending out that information very soon. So we recommend that you jump on this website. It's got a lot of really useful information. And it basically takes you through 3 steps. Knowing your risks, taking action, what can you do to prepare yourself? And then, what is the history of flooding in Nevada? So it's an interactive site, and there are some neat tools in there that you can use. It's also linked to the National Flood Hazard Layer. Type in your address, shows you where the floodplains are, shows you whether or not you're in. These were some activities that we did during the last Flood Awareness Week. And just want to point out Shyla and Karin here. They're here today. They're now celebrities. So, but these were some events we did for the Flood Awareness Week. We also had a kickoff event where we had the governor and the Mayor of Sparks and some other folks talk to us about flooding. So here's the resource page. And again, I can make all these resources available to you, but they're also available on our website. So I highly recommend you go to our nevadafloods.org website. What's that? Oh yes, our website actually won an award. About a month after it was launched, we were nominated for an award through the Floodplain Management Association, which is a tri-state organization that deals with floodplain management. Thanks for that reminder. So really, effective floodplain management comes down to all of us. We are all partners in this, whether you're just a citizen or whether you're a floodplain manager or a consultant working on floodplain issues. This really comes down to all of us. We have to work together. No agency has the money now to do big projects. We just don't. We have to leverage resources. We have to get together and work together. So, future flooding, I'll make some predictions. We will have a flood in the future. We'll probably have some flash flooding this summer. And we may have a riverine flood, even a major one, in the next few years. So, really I took this quote from an ancient Greek statesman and orator. Every investigation that can be made as regards to those duties for which an orator or floodplain professional should be held responsible, I bid you make. And what are those duties? To discern events in their beginnings and to foresee what is coming and forewarn others. So hopefully we've done that today. So is it safe to cross a flooded road? Okay, is it safe to cross this road? How many people would cross this road? Okay. How many people would have crossed that road 20 years ago? I want to be honest. Okay. Probably not a good idea. That road was already undercut, and the weight of your vehicle would have sent you into that abyss. Thank you.